Hi there. Today we're going to do another small format painting in my 12 days of painting, and we're just going to use 3 colors. So let's get started. Okay, the 3 colors we're going to use are quinacridone magenta, phthalo blue, and benzimidazzolone yellow. You could also use Hansa yellow, and all of the information is in your description. We're going to use some titanium white and some glazing liquid to keep our paint wet and make it blend better. So let's put our colors out. I'm working on a 6x6 canvas, and I've tried to make these paintings about 20 minutes or less so that you can make gifts for your family and friends without a whole lot of effort. These can be done pretty simply. So a little bit of yellow, a little quinacridone magenta, and a little phthalo blue. Now phthalo blue is really strong, so be careful with it. And some titanium white. Put that right in the middle. And a little glazing liquid down here. The glazing liquid looks white, but it dries absolutely clear. I'm using 2 brushes, a number 10 round and a number 6 round. And these are both in your description as well. Those are both Princeton brushes. So today we're going to do a little snow scene with a Christmas tree, which I think is appropriate for the winter season. I'm going to get a couple of paper towels and put them right next to my canvas. And I'm going to dip my brush in the water and then wipe it off. Try not to bring a whole lot of water over to the paint. So just moisten that brush and wipe it off. Okay, we're going to start with our sky. Little quin magenta, little glazing liquid, and just put that down. Go side to side, and you can see I'm just going side to side. Let's put a little more glazing liquid down. Just go side to side and let that paint blend on the canvas. Now let's add a little bit of titanium white. I'm going to have a kind of a rosy sky. Not too dark, because we're going to have that nice green evergreen tree in the front. Let's put a tiny bit of yellow down here just to warm things up, a little glazing liquid, and just let that blend right into the wet paint that you've already got going. There we go. Just keep blending. Okay, now I'm going to put a little mountain in the back, so I'm going to wipe my brush. I'm not washing it, I'm just wiping my brush. I'm not putting it in the water. And I'm going to put a real faint kind of mountain range back here. So I'm going to take a little bit of phthalo blue. Make sure you have very little, because it's so strong. And a tiny bit of quin magenta. Make a really nice purple. Now I'm going to grab a lot of titanium white because I want it to be really faint and feel like it's off in the distance. So that looks like that's a pretty good color. I don't want too much on my brush. And I'm just going to put that in the background real soft. You're going to pick up a little bit of that yellow. That's still wet, but that's just fine. Don't worry about that. We just want this kind of blue-gray hill in the background, just to kind of give us that distant hill. We don't want anything too bright. So I'm going to pull a little bit more of that blue. Let's make just a tiny bit more of that purple. Don't get it too dark. Come down here a little bit. That's fine. Now the fun part of this is that we're going to be painting snow, which is white, but we want a little bit of warmth underneath it. So I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to take my benzimidazzolone yellow right out of the bottle And even if I've got a little bit of blue or something on my brush, it doesn't matter. I just want this really bright underpainting in the ground beneath the tree. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. And I want just a little bit more of that purpley color. So you'll notice I'm not washing my brush. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more color right here. There we go. Just giving that hint of mountains back there. Okay, now I need for this yellow to dry really well. So I am going to give it a 5-minute drying time, and then we'll be right back. Okay, that has been drying for about 5 minutes, and that yellow area is nice and dry. So just make sure you don't paint down on the yellow while it's wet, okay? So now we are going to put our snow down, and I'm just going to go into the titanium white and just have some fun with that snow. Leave a little bit of that yellow glow underneath. But remember now, snow does not kind of lay in a straight line, so have some fun with it. Nice and juicy snow, leaving a little bit of that yellow show through, just a little bit. You don't need a whole lot. Every once in a while you could pick up a little tiny bit of that purpley blue that we made back there. Put that down every once in a while. Mine's getting dry, so I'm going to make some more. Now, because I'm making this blue on the palette with my brush that I was painting the snow with, my brush is going to be dirty. That's all right. I'm going to just put a few little blue pieces in here, like so. And then I'll come back, I'll wipe my brush, that'll get most of the blue off. I'll come back to my white and lay it down. Just when you lay it down, don't push too hard. Just let that brush kind of lay on top, and it won't blend with that blue. So we've got a little bit of that blue. I'm going to cover up a little bit more of it, but that gives a little bit of character to the snow. Snow is not just straight white paint. It doesn't look that great if you paint it that way. So you can see our snow has got some character here. We've got a little bit of that yellow showing beneath. You don't need a lot of it. We cover most of it, but it does give a little bit of flavor to that snow. And then a little bit of blue here and there. Okay. Now, we are going to put our tree, we're going to have a nice big Christmas tree right there in the middle, a nice big evergreen. We're going to put our tree right here in the middle. But if I start painting the tree trunk in this wet white paint, it's going to be very gray. So we're going to do another 5-minute drying time, and then we'll be right back. So make sure you dry your snow for about 5 minutes. Okay, we're back. We had 5-minute drying time for our snow. So now we're going to be able to paint our tree on top of that without blending into the snow. So I'm going to a number 6 round, and I'm going to make kind of a nice muddy brown. And to do that with these 3 colors, pretty simple. Let's start with a little of the Hansa yellow. I'll pull it down here. Let's make an orange. Add a little Quin magenta to that. A little more Quin magenta because we want a dark orange. There we go, dark orange. Now add a tiny, tiny bit of phthalo blue. Just be very careful with that phthalo blue. See, it doesn't take much. So now I've got that really nice, almost kind of a burnt umber brown that I wanted. And so now I can start with my trunk of my tree. So what I like to do is give myself an idea of where that tree is going to be. So what I usually do is I take the tip of my brush and I make some dots. I really want this tree to be the star of the show, so it's going to take up quite a bit of the canvas. So I'm going to just make some dots with the tip of my brush, and that's where my tree is going to start. So now I can go back here. I can put a tree trunk down. That's going to work pretty good. And I can just kind of flesh this out here. Most of that will be covered. I'll just flesh that out. Now that kind of establishes my tree. Now let's set the tree trunk. Wipe my brush. Now let's make a nice green. We're going to make a really nice kind of evergreen tree. So let's start with our Hansa yellow or Benzimidazolone, whatever yellow you're using, just as long as it doesn't have any red in it. Nice yellow here, a touch of that phthalo, very small amount, gets me a green. A little bit too bright. That's a little bit too bright. So let's add a tiny bit more phthalo, get a little bit darker green, and then let's add a little bit of that brown we made. And look at that. I get a really nice, more foresty green. Let's add a little bit more of that brown. I really like that brown. There we go. Now I'm going to bring some of the Hansa yellow over here, and I'm going to grab a tiny bit of that phthalo and put that there, because I just want to make variations of green. But this is kind of my base green color right here. So we're going to start building our tree, and since this is more or less an evergreen, it's going to be wider at the bottom and narrow at the top. So we're just going to start kind of establishing that tree shape. And remember, trees aren't solid objects, so just leave lots of air. We're just going to get started establishing where that tree lives, like so. And I'm just using the tip of my brush. You can roll it and make it do different things, but just the tip of your brush will be fine. Let's grab a little bit of that yellow and bring some of that in, a little bit brighter. Up here at the top of the tree, obviously where the sun hits it, the evergreen part would be a little brighter. And now let's add just a tiny bit of this blue down here. Just a variation in the greens, just so no, it's not one single note of green over and over and over again. A little bit more yellow. Let's go over here. Just start fleshing out that tree. Make sure you make it wider at the bottom. Wider. And once you establish how wide that bottom is going to be, make sure that you kind of move in a triangular pattern up to the top. Just leave lots of air space for that foliage. And I'm going to get a little bit more yellow. Just building that out so we get a really nice evergreen tree shape. Let's go a little bit wider down here. We really want this tree to be the star of the show. So make sure you make it majestic enough. Get a little bit more yellow. I'm going to grab some of that blue. Okay, how are we looking? Our tree's looking pretty good. I think we could use a little bit darker. I'm going to go back into my red, my Quin Magenta, and bring it right over here. I have green on my brush, so that's going to kind of make a brown. I'll grab some of this green here, just so we have some variation, right? And by the way, don't make everything super symmetrical. You can always turn your brush upside down and get different shapes with your brush. So you don't have to have these super symmetrical edges. Get a nice edge that looks organic. So that's a little bit too yellow up there. Okay, I think we're doing pretty good with our tree. Don't want to overwork it. Don't overwork your tree. Okay, now we're going to come back to our tree, and is my tree tipping sideways? It kind of feels like it's tipping sideways a little bit. Let's see, is it? Maybe not. Maybe that's me tipping sideways. We want to come back on top of our tree with snow, but again, we have to make sure everything really dries before we do that. So we're going to do one more 5-minute drying time, and we'll just pause the camera while we're doing that. 5 minutes, and we'll be right back. So when you need drying time on your painting, you can probably hear my fan going in the background. You can use a hair dryer on a cool setting. Don't use hot. That could possibly crack the paint. But you could use a hair dryer, and when you do that, make sure that the canvas is far away when you're using the hair dryer. Don't put it right on that. I'm using a cool fan, just a regular room fan, and that's what I prefer to use. And that will get your painting dry for you. And we'll be right back, and we'll start on the finished product of our painting. Okay, we've given our tree some time to dry so that we can put the snow down on top of it without getting a muddy color. And I washed my brush and I dried it off. So now I'm going to pick up a little titanium white, and you don't want much because we just want to touch the tips of the trees there. We don't want to overload it. So start with less, and you can always add more. Okay, so we'll just start with a little bit on the edges. And add that. Make sure you leave some of the green of the tree showing, because otherwise it will all look like one white snowy Christmas. Okay, let's just put a little bit here and there. I probably went a little heavy right there, but we can always come back. If that happens, if you do too much, you can always come back with your green and pick it up again and put your green in. Now see how my brush is really dry, so it really does feel like a lighter weight kind of snow. It doesn't feel heavy like this snow down here. I'm going to put a little bit up here. Just be very careful with that snow. You don't want too much. And as a matter of fact, I think what I'll do, I think I'll come back and show you how to correct this, because that is a little bit too much snow right here. So what I'm going to come do is I'm going to make a green. Let's grab a little bit of our phthalo blue. And I like that muddy green, so I need to make more brown. Let's grab a little red. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to break this up a little bit. It just got a little bit too heavy. I got a little exuberant there with the snow. And so all you need to do is just come back in and break it up so it's not too heavy. And see, I'm just doing the very same thing with the green that I did with the white. I'm just kind of dropping it in. This looks a little heavy right there. So it doesn't look quite so heavy. Let's knock back a little bit of this over here. Very dry brush, really dry brush. I think that's better. It doesn't look quite so clumped now, which is great. One final thing that we want to do, we want to come to the base of our tree here and pile up a little snow along the base of it here. And then you can, if you want to, put a little cast shadow. So I'll show you how to do that. I washed my brush, I dried it off really well. Now I'm going to a clean part of my palette paper, I'm going to get glazing liquid and a tiny bit of phthalo blue. I mean, a really, really tiny bit. That's way too much. You really want almost no paint, almost no paint. You just want a hint of color. You can always add more, but start out with less. Now, in order to make a cast shadow, we're just going to make a really soft pretend cast shadow. So I'm just going to bring this glazing mix here. You can see it has almost no paint in it. I'm just going to go like this. So faint. Look at that. Barely there. And that's what you want to do. Barely there. You don't want a great big dark shadow that doesn't look at all realistic. And this is just a little pretend shadow. So I'm going to go a little bit darker, a tiny, tiny bit darker, right here at the base. And just pull that out. And just make it really, really faint. Now that's just a tiny, tiny, very soft cast shadow. Oops, that's way too heavy. Let's wipe some of that off. And I think I'll just take my finger, because I've got that glazing liquid on there, and just soften it. Make sure it's doesn't have a really hard edge. There we go. Now we have just a hint of a cast shadow there. Of course, you could put a darker one if you want to, but it probably would be easier to just do a real simple one like this, okay? All right, well, that is our Christmas tree, our evergreen winter tree, and I hope you enjoyed doing that. That is another in the 12 days of painting. There will be more. So, as I always say, catch me in the next video and keep on painting. I'll see you later.